Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host, Jivraj, and today I have with me a very, very special guest. Join me in welcoming Harsh Singh, the co founder of Pristyn Care, which is one of the leading healthcare startups of the country. Thank you so much, Harsh, for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure and a pure honor for me to be able to host you.
No problem at all. It's enjoyable to be here, and I'll be glad to share some thoughts. And very excited to learn new things, going through new experiences. So thanks for inviting me.
Glad to hear that, Harsh. And I want to get the ball rolling by talking about the precursor to the Pristyn journey first, right? Because you've been vocal about the fact, and your journey is a testament to the fact that you've not given up, you've kept at it, and you've had these breadth of experiences that I'm guessing have now compounded in the way you're building Pristyn, right? So if you can talk to us about how did your love for entrepreneurship really begin? What made you keep at it? And also how these cumulative experiences actually played out for you and continue to add on to your aura as a whole with Pristyn. I think that would be great to get us started.
Sure. No, absolutely. So I think maybe a quick background. So I actually grew up in a small town in Ludhiana, Punjab. So there's a lot of entrepreneurial community out there. So you see, there is not a very organized job structure. There is no IT companies, no big MNCs of finance and stuff. So there's a lot of small time entrepreneurs. So I think grew in that family and that ecosystem. So I think there was always that exposure. I think largely for me, the turning point in my life was so I spent some time in the US, went to Duke University, and I think in the first orientation, uh, the guy our dean, his name was Dr. Jeffrey Glass, and he comes to the podium and says, life is a marathon and not a sprint. And I was like, what are you guys thinking, right? I'm thinking of finishing this school, going to Silicon Valley or going to New York and having a great life. And you are saying life is a marathon. It didn't occur. I was just hardly 20 something. So it was a very different point. But I think then during the course of those orientation sessions, we had some folks come in from very large companies, from Google's, from Facebook, Airbnb. All of this is like 10 years ago. Airbnb was very young. Google, of course, was very established, but still probably very different from today. So was YouTube, right? And I think listening to those folks, suddenly it felt so real. Being in India in probably 2008, it felt like that startups or the big companies are supposed to be established by folks in the West, and they will enter India, and or they'll be a business family out of Tata or a Reliance. It's not our job. But I think when I was in that community and met these folks who are so real, right? Wearing a flip flop or a t-shirt or a toned jeans, and having that stupid phone call during the interaction, just it made it so real. And I think that changed my thought process like drastically. It suddenly felt like that we can create businesses or products for the world. I was involved in everything on campus in entrepreneurship. I was an ambassador for entrepreneurship for my program. I started a consulting club, which was technically my first startup or a first thing I had started. So I think I had a phenomenal time. I was working in investment banking and was heading to San Francisco to start my full-time role. And I had these 2 months in between. I spent some time with a friend of mine at IIM Ahmedabad, and we were working on a stupid fuel cell technology. We didn't even understand it that much. We thought we'll write a cool paper, get some credits. But I think during the journey, we ended up, learning more about India's electricity theft. Yeah, Bijli ki chori, right? It's almost like $25 billion of electricity theft annually. And this is like 10 years ago. That number would have grown by now. And we felt, hey, is there a better way to solve it? In those 2 months interim, when I was supposed to take up my full-time role, and I was doing the internship, I think the momentum and the passion became so big that rather than accepting the role, I came back to India and started my first company with a very close friend of mine called Hydenpar, which was in electricity theft detection. Of course, we started with, like I said, maybe fuel cell production, ended up doing analytics. We ran that for nearly 1.5, 2 years. We developed some really cool software, really cool intelligence, analytics platforms. We worked with Delhi government, Punjab government, Nagpur government, and did a lot of work. But I think ended up sort of getting caught up in the way bureaucracy is supposed to function. And as a young person, you are like, we were guys with a backpack. We would climb walls in the time somebody would move our five. And it felt that this was not a culture we were able to adjust. And I think year and a half making no money, that sort of venture sort of folded up. Did a couple of things, started a mobile couponing business, which was in 2013 when Flipkart Zomato also did not have an app. It was mobile first, location first, hyper local. It was slightly ahead of its time, but again, it didn't work out. And so did a couple of other things. But I think for 5 years, I started three companies, none of them worked. Uh, and after 5 years, I think I could have probably killed a person, but not start a company. I was so sure in my mind and ended up going to Urban Clap or Urban Company today, which I think is one of the most amazing companies which have ever come out of India, one of the most amazing founders. I think that company or that startup, it was pre-revenue, very young, hardly a year into operation. That allowed me to actually continue my startup journey with a lot of support. There was capital, there was HR, there were smart folks. So there was a lot of support ecosystem, and I think that nurtured my more my entrepreneurial instincts a lot more than my own 5 years, and actually taught me a lot. But after, I think, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur, I think after 2.5 years, that itch of starting out came back so handsomely that it was literally hard to sort of, be focused in office, solve problems in office. And it felt like that I was maybe, not as diligent and honest to my role as I was for 2 years. And I think that sort of led to one thing to the another to start Pristyn Care. But I think to sort of summarize your question around where did the itch come in? I think it's like almost a Punjabi guy, why do you like aloo ka paratha? I don't know. Or a Gujarati guy, why do you like dhokla? It's hard to explain. Yeah. It is like when you talk about the idea, when you think about it, it just gives you the kick. It just makes you inspired. It just makes you go for it. It just is so natural. And I think that is also very critical to me. I see a lot of folks actually start companies just because they see, founders raising capital, getting on a magazine cover, or doing a story like we are doing right now. Then they see this, and then they end up starting something out for most of the rewards and not necessarily for the tough parts of it. And I think that's when people give up. I think if it is not natural to you, don't do it. Yeah. So I think it's just been so natural to me over the last 10 years that it is my second nature. And I think even here at Pristyn today, we are 1,200 folks. I think the culture is so entrepreneurial. Anybody who's actually not doing original is actually not respected. So if you come up with an original idea and you have the leverage to go out and execute and fail, we don't fear failure. We failed so many times in my life that is the culture we love. We love, and I think that's what we are forthcoming. So I think it's more about ingrained rather than forced.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. Like, so much of what you've said is such a great way to start, because the intrinsic motivation to start and the love for building, I think, is so evident just by your actions. I think your actions speak louder than the words. And it's a testament to the fact that if you're a real builder, you'll keep at it and you'll eventually find your way, which you have.
Yeah.
And now coming to that side of it, right now with Pristyn, right? So you told us about how you got here, but can you perhaps also talk to us about, given that you were entering, let's say, an industry or, surgeries, as they say, right? It was not the cool thing to do, right? It was not something you came from either, right? And there were so many, and it was not like there were incumbents to, let's say, do Me Too products from, right? So there were nothing of the kind, and it was uncharted territory that you took, right? So can you perhaps like just walk us through what clicked with Pristyn? How did you, like, to begin with, establish and come across the problem? Then what was your sense of validation and the early days of just going to that 0 to 1 journey, as they call it, right? You started with 3 founders. I remember you saying in a previous interview that everything was being done by the 3 of you, right? And from the smallest of things, right? You personify the fact that doing things that don't scale. So just like, I think a good overview of that entire starting out phase, which established the conviction that this is something that you've been very vocal about, the fact that you want to do this for the next 20-25 years, right? And to see that conviction in your words speaks volumes. Just walk us through what got that conviction building.
Right. Yeah, I think it also, you asked me a question around, I'm not really, I think the question is, I'm not from healthcare. And, how does, in a very different industry, traditionally, industry which also has not been very innovative. I think, any industry, it's at the end of the day, a problem solving, right? At Urban Clap, I got a chance to build their beauty services business, which is more like salon at home or massage at home. I've never been to salon in my life. And coming from a Sikh faith, that was very That was alien thing to me. And I remember when the co-founders at Urban Company or Urban Club said that, hey, why don't you take up salon? I was like, dude, look at me. I don't know what getting a haircut means. And how can you ask me to build salon? And they say, hey, maybe looks like there's nobody else right now. And you are the only person who doesn't have real thing going on in Urban Club. Maybe you are the only free one. So I think that it's also a testimony to their culture, right? They didn't look at that, hey, is it a culture fit? They just felt that, hey, it's a problem solving. So I think healthcare is similar. It's a problem solving for me. I actually got exposed to healthcare, a few years back. So my both co-founders are also very, very close friends. One of them I know for nearly about 30 years. I used to hang out with him in Max. He was a doctor. He's a surgeon. His name is Vaibhav Kapoor. He used to, he was working at Max Gurgaon. We are based out of an NCR, so Max Gurgaon. And I used to hang out with him on Sundays when he would have slight work, not really occupied at work. After finishing work at Urban Club or Urban Company, we used to work Monday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday. Sunday, probably 3, 4 p.m. I had nothing else to do, and I would go to Max and hang out with him for 5, 6 hours. For me, I think that's the first exposure of healthcare for me. I ended up marrying a doctor, so I think that became the second exposure. But I think more than that, I think the problem of Pristyn or how it all got started, we actually don't have a very rosy story. Neither did we have one, neither did we build one to tell out the world, I guess. But honestly, the way it functioned is both my co-founders were starting out their own private practice. And both of them are amazing folks, amazing surgeons, and we are into surgery business. So both of them are amazing surgeons, very, very smart, very dedicated. One of the sharpest doctors I know, apart from my wife, you have to say that. Right. So they were starting their private practice, and I was like having that itch of doing something on my own. I said, hey, why don't we do it together? Maybe I can get some patients and maybe you can operate. That's all that really I can do. We really hadn't pinpointed the problem. I was having such a strong itch to do out something on my own, and two of my closest friends were starting their sort of a private practice. Hey, why don't we do it together? We didn't really have the model or the business in mind. It's when we started, and we were so small. We started out of Gurgaon. It was a room of 10 by 10. And, being in healthcare, we didn't even have a clinic of our own. So there was this polyclinic which had like 5 chambers and 5 different doctors would come there. And the 3 of us would sit in that chamber. And if a patient would come out, whoever patient would it be, myself and the other doctor would come out. And then they would do the patient consult, and then we would go in and sit there. Like we didn't really have an office, but we were just 3 folks, very, very excited what we wanted to do. I think because we were so small, and there was that always, being doctors, they were used to performing things themselves. And I came from a background where the only thing I really learned was go in the trenches and do it yourself. I think there was a culture of doing everything on our own. Very honestly, we couldn't afford it as well, right? So there was no chance. So if we all our savings, whatever little we had, were in it. So we said, yeah, let's just do everything ourselves. When we started handling patients, that is when we started seeing the real problems. I remember there was a patient who was, there was a surgery which was lined up, and that patient's son was in US. He calls us on the morning of the surgery. He said, hey, we'll have to cancel. I was like, what's going on? You have one patient, and that is also canceling. Like you are like having a heart attack. I was like, what's going on? He said, you know what? My mom and dad are in Noida. They're all by myself, and it's dad's procedure. And dad is having cold feet. He's not having, he's unable to drive his own car. And he's getting maybe a little worked up. And I think in the spur of the moment, we said, hey, why don't we can pick him up from home? Like, that's fine. I mean, I would feel go to Noida and pick him up and get him to Gurgaon. That's fine. He said, if you would do that, then it's okay. He's like, oh, sure, why not? It helps us save a customer or a patient in our case. We actually drove that customer from home, from his home, the couple to Gurgaon. And then, when during the journey, we ended up realizing I had actually never had any family member undergo procedure. Neither I had ever undergone a procedure. So it's something, the hard part about our business is we cannot go out to somebody and say, why don't you experience our service? Like, that's the challenge, right? And you can't really manufacture it, right? So, but during the journey, I think what we learned was that the morning of the surgery, while it is a simple procedure, you fear going to a hospital, you fear going to an operation theater. It's a fearful process. And he said, hey, why can't we do a pickup for every patient? And I think we started testing it out. And today, every patient, Pristyn, we'll handle, nearly probably 20,000, cab rides for our patients. And we don't charge them for it, picking them from home and getting them to our clinics or our hospitals, just because healthcare can be, painful. And similarly, another incident happened, a patient, we were taking him for a surgery, and the admission was supposed to happen. And again, my friend, my Weber was supposed to do the surgery. So as a doctor, he's going upstairs. I'm sitting out there waiting for the procedure to happen because I had nothing else to do. And we saw that patient had to spend 3 hours for the admission. There was online paperwork, stuff like that. Now somebody who's going to go for a surgery is sitting on the reception for 3 hours. It felt unreal. At Urban Club, if a customer had one complaint, like the entire company would shake up. And here was a customer suffering for 3 hours. It was unreal to us. And I think, just after the surgery, we went to the reception counter and said, what was the problem? What were the challenges? What were the delays? And we started testing out that how can we solve it for a patient. Today, while we are not perfect, but nearly 85-90% of our patients get admitted to a hospital, one of our partner hospitals, in under 30 minutes. We do every paperwork in advance. Again, I think it's work in progress, but every paperwork is docu-signed. It's done a night in advance. That's how we do it. Similarly, insurance clearance. When we had to get our first patient's insurance cleared, we went to the hospital, submitted the documents, waited for 24 hours, and we said, this is crazy. I'm like, here, our heart is palpitating that will this guy accept a procedure from us and we'll be able to convert him. You are thinking like a little middle entrepreneur. And now they're saying, come back after 24 hours. This is like not done. Today, we built a very smart data analytics, entire ecosystem that we can tell you if your insurance is covered in under 20 minutes, right? So I think it's the joy of doing everything ourselves from early on, which taught us that journey of a patient, right from finding the doctor, coming to the hospital, getting an admission, getting his insurance, actually getting a surgery done, going back home, coming for a follow-up is so painful. Diagnosis in between. We said, why can't we take care of the entire thing? I'll tell you another example. We had a patient, and she went home, and my co-founder said, I fear that she will not do her exercises and not take care of her diet well. We said, okay, why don't we inform her? And he said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And he we called the patient every day for the next 7 days, telling them what the diet and the recovery. I think we ended up realizing the biggest reason patients don't recover as well is because they don't follow the instructions. Again, we have not solved the problem up, but every patient in Pristyn is actually nearly forced for a follow-up. If they can't come to a clinic, it's done online, and they're not charged for it. Very unreal for the healthcare world. They are not charged for it. But we almost force every patient to do a follow-up. And one of our co-founders, Dr. Garima, is we're so passionate about solving this that a co-founder puts in a lot of her time just on this problem. And again, just solving the journey problem of a patient and looking everything from our own perspective. We have seen all those problems ourselves. Today, even when a senior person joins Pristyn, doesn't matter any level, but even the senior most level, he's actually sent out to, go to the hospital, see a surgery, sit inside a clinic, go inside an admission line, and actually do everything yourself. I think there is no better advice we can ever share with the founders. Do everything yourself. Most of these things will never, ever scale. Like we picking up our patients ever cannot scale, but today there's an ecosystem which does that. But we know it because we did it ourselves. So do everything yourself and do things which don't scale.
That's brilliant. I think all of that, I mean, the candid flow of thought in saying that there will never be a formula. You have to just go out there, find your own formula, and just like do it yourself is so sublime to witness. I mean, I love those humble beginnings and all of the stories you mentioned. Like they're a testament to how amazing the culture and fundamentals are at Pristine. And we'll talk about it more. But I just want to understand therein, right? Like, so when I was hearing you, the question in my mind that was revolving is that given that, so Pristine is also known for, and you've emphasized on it yourself, on great customer experience, in this case, patient experience, right? And so, given that there are so many moving parts to the operational overflow, right? Like, so many of the things that you told us, for the patient it may now seem like it's a very easy process because of Pristine, but internally I'm sure there has to be a method to the madness, right? So can you like talk to us about how now you've been able to maybe create a lot of sync between the multiple moving parts? How do you look at organizational design, and how have you been able to scale some of these things to ensure that when you're building for the 20 years, it just gets done in a very fundamentally smooth manner internally as well? I think that would be great to observe.
No, actually, I think today Pristine has nearly 45 odd teams, and every team has been born out of one of those challenges. And every patient who comes to Pristine, one of our, when you talk to our patients, of course we are making mistakes. Of course, there is. I think we have done probably 0%, and there is 100% improvement necessary. But I think when you speak to some of our best patients, they will always come back and tell you, "We are." I didn't even realize that my surgery was done. In a local language, they'll say, "यार मुझे पता ही नहीं चला मेरी surgery कब हो गई." And I think that is music to our ears. So every patient in Pristine is given a care coordinator or a care buddy who's available as a guide, 24/7 to the patient. Because think about it, it is like saying most patients actually undergo less than one surgery in a lifetime. They really don't have a prior experience. So the path is so, there is so much anxiety, there is so much of unknown ambiguity that how will it function? I have to get to a doctor, I have to get to a diagnosis, I have to get insurance, I have to get my pre-anesthesia checks, I have to talk about my, if I have diabetes, if I have I'm taking a insulin injection. Like patient doesn't even know that he has to talk about these issues and solve these problems. So I think every patient in Pristine today gets a care buddy which sort of fronts this entire piece. But I think on the back end is the operational design which you hinted at. Now, we are an ops business, and I think an anecdote, when we were at Urban Club, I ended up we were having this fiery conversations with our founders there, and it ended up saying, "Hey, we built a tech company." And I think very quickly, Abhiraj, one of the founders, said, "यार लेकिन ऐसा लग रहा है कि यार हमें तो सबसे पहले salon चलाना सीखना पड़ेगा, right? If you're building beauty services or if you're doing an AC repair, you actually have to go out and see how it is done." So I think at that moment, suddenly technology becomes the biggest enabler, but you have to be operationally solid. And the second thing which you'll see with most operationally heavy companies such as ourselves, Urban Clap, Flipkarts of the world, while technology is at it, business and operations is always running ahead, because all the companies which succeed are able to do it because they are able to execute very well. And I think a famous we talk about here in Pristine often, यहाँ तो बंदा गलत है, यहाँ धंधा गलत है, right? If you are saying the problem is right, then you cannot blame that technology got solved. Technology is an automation. Every time we look at technology, it's an automation, right? Absolutely. So everything we do in Pristine, first it is done by ourselves. Somebody will do it. A lot of times it was the founder, but that culture is not changed. Even today, when we launch a new category, if we launch a new, operational process, it is done by the senior most, probably the senior most person in the company. Sometimes the founders, sometimes the leadership team, sometimes the media leadership team. So somebody will do it. So I think talking about the operational design, when we started building our ops, the journey did not happen like today itself. We started, the step one was we started doing everything ourselves. There was a time between the three of us, 50 people reported to us, and all of them were 50 teams. So every person was just one team. Was technically we were trying to figure out 50 or maybe 100 problems. Right. Then we solved one problem. When we solved one problem, it looks like this is getting solved, but as we are scaling, now we need more people to solve it. Then we put in two more folks to solve that problem. When that problem started, when the business started scaling, that problem started scaling, we said, okay, now we have solved it at least 100 times. Now we know how it's going to be solved even in our sleep. Now let's build tech over it. So I think that's sort of a journey for us. First, one leadership does it. Then we scale it to probably 3 or 4 folks. When we have done it 100 times over, we say, now we know what is the product. Now we know what is the spec. Now we know what is the problem solving. So we are not guessing. And I think that culture, I think, has stayed with us, that everything is done by one leader followed by two folks, and then we build a technology out of it. So I think that's how our operations has today, swelled up. I'll give you an example. During lockdown, last year we started, actually little bored last year, we started facing this challenge that patients were getting delayed. While we were booking their cabs, they were getting delayed. Then we said, hey, now patients are getting delayed, their admission gets delayed. If their admission gets delayed, their insurance gets delayed. If their insurance gets delayed, their surgery gets delayed. And surgery gets delayed, doctor's schedule goes over a toss. So it was a cascading effect. So we put, again, one person to say, why don't you make sure the patient reaches on time? So he said, okay, I am going to ensure that the patient reaches on time. When we started doing that, we ended up realizing there were so many patients that he was not able to manage it. So we put three smart people. When we started to solve why doesn't the patient on time, we said, okay, we are not booking the cab on time. Then say, okay, once the cab is on time, our admission gets delayed. Why does our admission get delayed? Because there was a paperwork which was not done. Okay, let's solve the paperwork. Now our paperwork is done. Then why are we delayed? Oh, the special equipment for the surgery did not flow in. Then we created an information system for it. That how does the information for the equipment flow in? Then said, okay, now it is booked in. Now what happens? Oh, the hospital got delayed. How do we make sure hospital ecosystem information is not a bias? We created a hospital app. So the ecosystem the information started to flow to the hospital. Then we said the doctor is getting delayed. Okay, how do we make sure the doctor doesn't get delayed? Yeah. Then we started solving. We have a doctor app. Every surgeon is on app. He sees his entire history on the app. EMR, everything is on the app. Yeah. So we started created alerts in doctor's app. So I think as we started to do this, we ended up realizing today that the team is about 40 people, but they're handling probably 30 times the size, but it is still inefficient, but there's now a lot of technology which has built it. And I think that's the story of every team. You start with a human, two folks, you start to put it out, you start to solve at scale, build technology out of it, and then bring the efficiencies. And I think everything sort of flows like that. Today, there's a team or there's a team slash process. There is either a team or there's a technology process working in which schedules the OPD, or there's of course an automatic scheduler. Somebody ensures that the patient reaches on time. Again, it's a technology process. Somebody ensures that 100 clinics are functional. So there's a clinic team which makes sure all the clinics are open, the information is flowing, the doctors are there, the receptionists are there, the clinics are stocked. Somebody ensures that the payment happens at the clinic. So there is a technology payment process. Then somebody ensures, or some process ensures that, if there's a special equipment necessary, that request flows into the ecosystem. Somebody ensures that equipment is transported from one of our warehouses to the hospital. Somebody ensures that there is, diagnosis being done. So we have a lot of diagnostic partners. Yep. So there is a booking process. Somebody ensures that insurance is getting cleared. Today we clear an insurance in 30 minutes. So there's an insurance. There's entire work we've done in insurance. We have a huge insurance team and a lot of work. So I think, I can go on and on and on, but it's a complete process which has evolved from that 3-member team, which the 3 co-founders were.
Wow, I think it's just so overwhelming to just get an inside view of how well things are functioning now and how you started again. I see this evident need to just solve the smaller blocks as opposed to just doing everything at once and just like targeting each problem one at a time so that the mountain eventually gets crossed as well. So I think that's wonderful to hear, Harsh. I think thanks for that walk away. That was truly wonderful to hear. Further, just like a very quick follow-up to that is, right, you've been very strong of very vocal in terms of the strong values that Pristyn has always had, right? And some of which you mentioned in this conversation as well, right? The bias for action, the strong fundamentals that the company has, and everybody being a hands-on player. But talking about the other fundamentals as well, right? You've always been very particular about strong unit economics. You've always been very particular about how the team shapes up and things like that. Can you perhaps just give us a quick walkthrough of how the culture, and especially given that you're at a juncture where the company is blitzscaling, as they call it, right? How do you scale up culture, ensure that the core values are intact, and ensure that speed or scale does not become or block your view of the cultural values at the company? I think that would be phenomenal to hear.
No, absolutely. I think, having, like I said, having failed 3 startups, and from 2010 to 2015 saw 3 startups which went nowhere. You would have never heard of any of them. And then being part of Urban Clap, a successful startup, there's a lot of noise in failure, but it's very hard to say what failed. But when you see some success, and seeing that success at Urban Club or Urban Company, I think you learn tons. I think a lot of what I've learned has been shaped up through those last 10 years. So it's not really an overnight success. Of course, a lot of founders have had overnight success. Probably I'm not as smart as them. It took me a lot of time to sort of come to this level. But I think culture has been a super critical focus from day one. And for us, even, the culture starts from, first of all, hiring the right people. We are 1,200 in number today, and every person who has joined Pristyn, off-roll or on-roll, has been interviewed by one of the three founders, right? And I think that it starts from there. Even today, from 9 p.m. I have to take interviews because there is no other way, right? Of course, I think as we are scaling now more, we are trying to build even more smarter processes. But I think for the largest time, every person who's joined Pristyn, was interviewed by one of the three co-founders, right? That is a culture fit, right? The second point is absolutely knowing, what you're looking for. One not very smart thing we did very, very early on. All three of us were married. And we said, yeah, it's very hard. You have to work Monday to Sunday. You are putting, coming at and early in the morning and leaving at 10 p.m., 10, 11 p.m. And it's hard to deal, ecosystem at home. It's tough for your partner. And we said, if we have to, while we might have made peace with our partners and they have been super, super supportive, that might not necessarily always happen. So I think for the first nearly about a year, we had this stupid policy, unknown stupid policy. It was never written anywhere. Where they said we used to hire zero married people, like zero. There was not even one married person getting hired. I remember, Sikoa coming to us and saying, dude, you need to change this. You need to, start thinking more maturely. And today it is so different. I think 40% of our workforce is, married, and I think we've learned. But I think, as an early company, I never built a company which was, at this scale. So I think there was some of those cultural things and mistakes which you do early on. To sometimes we, I think, miss talent as well. But I think so hiring, every interview done by one of the three co-founders was the first. The second thing is, in the interviews, for us, talent is a filter, right? You have smart background, यार ये अच्छी जगह से पढ़ाई किया है, he's done some good work, with some startups or some background. You filter that on first step. The second step is this guy or a girl a culture fit? So I think we have been, we used to have this, again, a very funny way of checking people on currentometer. We said, does this guy have enough current? Because in startups, you have to steamroll so many things, right? If you are, very docile and you are waiting for things to happen, like you can't get done much. We said anyone we hire should be capable of, doing things themselves. If this guy doesn't fit there, or it doesn't have a score high on a currentometer, let's not hire. Okay. And we did those stupid things early on. They were not very smart, by the way, but helped us. Okay. So I think the second thing was making sure that, hiring, making sure the culture is ahead of the talent. The talent is a filter. We said, make sure culture is high. The third part is putting down, or even actually before, is putting down what your culture is and then communicating it super, super strongly. We very early on, while we defined our core values in probably later time, but very early on, we said three things cannot change. Extreme ownership. I'll give you an example. Today, let's say there is a team who is running a P&L leadership, right? Let's say that there's a category head who runs a business, or in our case, let's say a disease line. If his job is to ensure he has to deliver a certain number, and he has to solve a lot of problems. He has to solve marketing, he has to solve technology, he has to solve operations, he has to solve insurance, he has to solve medical directorate because we have a lot of doctors, and he has to solve a couple of other things. Now, his success is dependent on solving all of things. Now, that guy, if he has a target, he can never come back, to the leadership and come back and say, I couldn't do this because technology team did not live up. Marketing team did not live up. That is unacceptable. And that is very, very early on. Even today, while we are now slightly more structured, never ever will a category head, a senior manager, or a GM, or a VP, nobody will ever say, I missed my target because a different team did not do a job. That, I think, has been a culture. So just extreme ownership was something we were so critical. The second thing which we were so critical about was, doers in the trenches. Would you do this yourself? Would you talk to the patient? Would you, apart from being the doctor, because that is, you can't do that, everything else, think about it. When we started, my both co-founders were doing the surgery themselves. I was doing, the BD, the technology, the marketing, the fundraise myself. It was like all three of us were a unit. And he said, if we, like, had we not built a company, we would have built a very, very profitable clinic. We would have not been required as staff, and we would have done phenomenally well in our lives, right? So I think we understood the importance of being a unit and being self-sufficient so early on that we would almost test folks that will this guy work in the trenches. We used to give them, tasks and projects to work on very early. A lot of folks have talked about this. We will give them a case study and stuff like that. We used to candidly do interviews at 11 p.m. to see, will this guy go beyond? Will this guy, I know there's a lot of talk about work-life balance, and I think as we are getting there, we are improving. But when you are starting up, you want everybody to be putting in probably 28 hours in your 24 hours. I mean, that's the honesty. I know a lot of people talk about it differently, but the honesty is we were overworked. But then we wanted to build what a larger company had built in 30 years. We said, how can we build in 5 years? We had to, and there's never been a Google or a Facebook which has been born out of a 9 to 5 job. It's just almost impossible, right? So we would test for ownership. We would test for folks doing things in trenches. The third thing we would test, like almost like test in interviews, questions, was collaboration. If you notice, we knew that if we'll scale, technology will always come in. We will have to work with people. And in India, we still lack. There's a lot of technology to be built, right? I think if a person cannot work with another person, he will definitely fail. So we used to test collaboration, like almost try to find out those pearls in their knowledge. That how about doing this? How about doing that? So I think those extreme ownership, working in the trenches, and collaboration. We used to call this. There's a very famous quote by, I think, one of the co-founders, which says, "The brilliant jerk is useless. If that guy cannot collaborate, then he's a failure." So I think these three were our sole point of checks early on. Will he have extreme ownership? Will he, have work in the trenches and go beyond? And will he collaborate with people? I think over time we had two more which came in, which was patient obsession, because everything in Pristyn, if it's right for the patient, let's do it now, we'll think it later. And the fifth part is integrity, right? I mean, as you are scaling the business, you are having so much faith on everybody around. Like if somebody wants to defraud you on numbers, on data, on money, there is loopholes because we are not very solid, right? Yeah. So I think integrity has become super critical, especially for the patients, because there's somebody's health at stake. So I think that two things have added on to our repertoire. But collaboration, extreme ownership, and working in the trenches. That was our culture. So hiring right, checking for this, and over communicating it. Like we would over communicate this. We wanted to make sure anybody who comes in the company knows this. Even today, this is taught in our onboarding session. But very early, we used to be onboarding session. We communicated it like crazy. Like you would not believe how crazy we were on this. In fact, a lot of our when one used to lose temper and all those things, it was because something failed. I think the fourth part is, how do you promote this? The only way to promote this is when you showcase, success to somebody who displays these qualities. So I think we were lucky enough to hire a lot of folks who were amazing. A lot of our initial leadership is here, but we have been, taking them through the ranks higher and higher because they have been showing these. Even I can talk about my culture values on the wall. Yeah. But if we don't promote folks who have shown those values, then it doesn't mean it's all. So I think just promoting people and then highlighting again, so I think that has worked for us. And I think the final thing on all this is leading from the front. I think every leader we talk about, we just are, I'll tell you, one of our finance guys today, he was in office pacing up and down on a Sunday and not really actually doing a lot. He was helping out his wife at home on the phone on a Sunday. I was like, if you're occupied, why don't you go home? And he said, yeah, my team is sitting in office. I have done my work. I need to make sure they finish it. and I'm not able to help out here, but I can't go home because they're here. Now, a lot of folks question this is the right way, but the point is that that is the belongingness, that is the ownership, that is the collaboration, that is the culture which is communicated by the leaders right at the top. And I think you see that coming on. We've hired a leader from a from an amazing company right at the top, and he was doing patient calls yesterday, because while in one of the meetings we ended up saying, yeah, a patient कैसे सोचता है, what do you think this is? And he said, hey, we don't know, we need to go talk to the patient. So he's actually talking to the patient himself. So I think just bringing those values, promoting them, over communicating them, and leading from the front. As founders, as leadership, whenever we've had a leadership conversation, that's all we tell them: lead from the front. So I think that's good
Wow.
for us.
No, this is brilliant. I think these are pearls of wisdom for anybody listening, because this was like almost a masterclass on culture. Because so much of what you said, right? A rocket ship will only get built if you have all of these factors ingrained and then packaged into one and then reflected
Right.
by action, which is so true and so reflective of what Pristyn is able to do. But I really mean this. This was wonderful to hear, Harsh, and very, very
Thanks for that.
understanding of just like how we can as operators also just inculcate these properties, right? Anybody who wants to be a part of a rocket ship has to have all of these functions: the
Yeah.
commitment, the action, the will to just do it. I think all of those are amazing factors. Wonderful to hear that. I think this has been a lovely conversation, but as we move on to the closing parts, right, Harsh, I just want to quickly take a stab at, you spoke about the overworking and it resulting in that 5 years of the 30 years in 5 years, right? And the growth has been no secret to anybody, right? Pristyn has grown exponentially in the last couple of years, and we've seen something unprecedented, right? Like without even going into the numbers, we can safely claim that, your scale in terms of the teammates and everything has grown rapidly, and so has the penetration in the underdeveloped cities, or the tier 2 3 cities of the country, as
Yeah.
we call it, right? So talk to us about how you've been able to manage these growth loops and maybe standardize experience across the board, right? Because eventually, and I'm sure the vision with Pristyn is also to just deliver this best in class experience to each and every patient in the
Yeah.
country, right? Despite Nagpur, Indore, Patna, Kolkata, Mumbai, Delhi, right? So how do you ensure that, and how do you ensure the growth that you have gone in the path of, and make sure it becomes repeatable bit by bit?
Right. Yeah. So no, absolutely. I think few things have worked for us. First of all, today we operate in 30 odd cities, which includes the 7 big metros. But then it has an Indore. You talked about Indore. It has a Patna. It has a Ranchi. We went actually live in Ranchi few weeks ago. It has a Guwahati. It has a Jammu. It has a Ludhiana, which is our hometown. It has a Bhubaneswar, which is a slightly larger town. It has a Bhopal, which is a small town. It has a Coimbatore, which is one of our largest cities down south. So I think we've been able to expand. Today, 30% of our business almost comes from our tertiary cities. So I think we've done fairly well. You know, one of us, when we started Pristyn, one of the guiding lights which I'll share with you, almost like our why are we doing this? Somebody asked us, like, why are you really doing this? I'll tell you something. We, growing up in the north, having exposure in Delhi, always ended up seeing that if you're somebody special, like you go to a hospital and somebody in the hospital, you will get a bigger room, you will get a quick admission, you will get a longer consult from a doctor. I mean, it extends to everywhere. If you know somebody at a restaurant and there is no space, and they will find space for you. If you know somebody at a school, your child will get admission. I think at some point, on a very personal note, I felt that I was a very misfit in this kind of give favor, take favor, or you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, or kind of an environment. I just felt super uncomfortable, almost asking for favors. Also, in this regard, that hey, I am special, so why didn't you make way for us? And I think as patients, we felt that patient, especially is in pain or in discomfort during a procedure. But if a patient knows somebody important at a hospital, or he knows the doctor, he gets 5-star facilities. I think the vision for us is that is unfair. Healthcare should be fair for everyone. So irrespective of your background, your culture, your socioeconomic status, your gender, your disease, your ticket size. If you are a patient who's going to be billing to the hospital a few lakh rupees, he's a master guy, right, in a bigger hospital. Irrespective of all this, a patient should get 5-star opinion, 5-star sort of a treatment. Every patient, and I think we have extended that beyond our metros. So even in Bhopal, the same medical technology is available as it is in Gurgaon. Even in Guwahati, or in Coimbatore, or in Chandigarh, it is the same quality of doctor with similar background and experience as it is in Bombay. Even in Nagpur, every patient gets a cab ride as he gets in Bangalore. Every patient gets a free follow up that is there in, let's say, Hyderabad. Every patient gets a priority when he's in uncomfortable over other patients who might be waiting in line, just because he's in discomfort in Chennai as it is in a small town like Chandigarh. So I think we've been able to do that, and I think that's something we are super passionate about. So I think that helps when you know clearly in your mind this is what you stand for.
Yeah.
The second part is, when you start doing this, you start making playbooks. Another thing which has worked for most startups is when we were able to make a playbook in Gurgaon, we said whenever we go live in another city, we will use this playbook, right? So that doesn't change. So it doesn't matter what city is it, the playbook remains same. If a playbook is updated in Chandigarh, it'll be updated in Coimbatore, it'll be updated in Nagpur, Bombay, Bangalore, Chennai, everywhere. So I think having those playbooks is a huge sort of it's a very simple thing, but it helps crazily. Now everybody knows that if a new city like Ranchi is being launched, there needs to be these 20 things which needs to be done from a playbook. Otherwise, the city doesn't get live. Like we have put those filters in the system that if this playbook is not ticked, the system doesn't go live. So that establishes that everything which is happening in Gurgaon or Delhi is happening in a smaller town as well. So I think that playbook helps a lot, like crazy. The second, and I think even more important part of doing anything, not just in Pristyn, in any other startup, is actually, building a phenomenal team. And I think we've been very, very lucky from early on. The leadership, the mid-tier leadership, the senior leadership, every leadership in Pristyn, I think 99% of the success goes to them, to the team as a whole, and we are part of that team. And probably 1% goes to our destiny. Everything else is faff. Everybody works hard. Everybody is smart. There are a lot of people who have smart ideas. There are a lot of people who have capital, but not everybody is able to execute, right? So it's 90%, 99% of the team, and 1% is probably destiny that we've been able to do this. So having a great team, communicating them our ethos, knowing your identity, and then creating playbooks. So it doesn't matter where you go live, the playbook needs to be followed. And if you have that in your mind, I think that works out. So I think I would encourage, we encourage in our internal ecosystem, I would encourage every startup, and I think we are learning daily from some of the largest startups in the world today, build those playbooks and build those filters in the system that if this playbook is not live, an ecosystem, a city, a territory, a category, a geography, a product cannot go live. And if you do that, I think, and then you create those checks, right? You create those reportings, you create those metrics to do if something is broken, let's solve it. So I think that works.
Right. Awesome. I think that's fabulous to hear. Just the fact that, the stronger fundamentals that get carried on to ensure that you're not going to compromise on quality just on the basis of growth, that I think is so ingrained and just going to, make sure that everything falls in place. I think that's wonderful to hear. And all of the things that you mentioned, of course, like establishing those playbooks and then executing on them is a must. Great. This has been wonderful. And as we close down the episode, I just want to take a couple of minutes to just talk about you now and maybe a couple of questions personal to you that help us understand and more so learn from your values, right? So you spoke about, somebody asked you why are you doing this, right? But I'll flip the question and ask you a very fundamental, so to say, life question without getting philosophical in nature, of course. But the point being that, given that a large part of this has happened, you've been very conviction led, you've been very humble in this conversation, and that shows. But what eventually does this all compound towards, right? So we understand from a Pristyn perspective, you're working towards solving the healthcare spectrum for the country, right? And which is a noble as well as great tangible goal. But what for you personally compounds to success? What does success eventually mean for you? And what is that North Star that you personally are chasing? I think that'd be great to just hear from you.
uh, you know, see, here's the thing. I think, when I was growing up, like I was telling you, I come from a small town. There were a lot of entrepreneurs who were successful there. Used to run some sort of a manufacturing or a factory, as they would call it, and I thought that was the only business in the world. That if you want to be successful in life, like try starting a factory. And I would try to talk to my dad and try to visit some of these factories. He was in that business there. He could have a lot of access. So I would go and visit them, and I would feel very happy about it. That, oh, looks like something. There is so many cycle parts, textile, food. I saw so many of them that are finished productions. I felt very happy about it till I went to US, and the thought process completely changes. And I was growing up. I'm a very fond of, I'm a foodie, and it sort of also reflects not the most fittest, I think, as of now. I thought the only thing I will ever do in my life is, and this is actually candid, right? Anything I would do in my life is probably put a paratha factory, and that would give me happiness. And I think when we raised capital for the first time at Pristyn, I thought I got a space to open that factory. And when we got some more folks and we started, I thought the factory expanded. So I think I'm that a lot of people talk about that kid in a candy store. I think I'm a kid in a paratha factory for me. It's a very ingrained happiness of being able to do this. And sometimes it is unjustified. You can't really put in words that, of course it has brought financial success. It has brought some recognition. But whenever I'm coming to office every day, that the joy of just being able to build this, take this further and seeing that sort of that playground becoming bigger, uh, it is almost a drive that it is very, very hard to sort of comprehend. I don't know if there's a better answer to this, but it's just so much happiness. It is like, somebody who likes, let's say, playing a sport, playing a soccer or playing a cricket, and whenever they step onto the playing field, they feel happiness, they feel relaxed, they feel driven, they feel passionate, they feel like going at it. I think whenever I'm stepping inside office or thinking about Pristyn, I feel driven, I feel passionate, I feel like I'm going to play my favorite sport, I'm going to eat my favorite food, I'm going to have my favorite travel. It is just so much happiness that it doesn't feel like work. And I think for me that is very, very critical. In terms of the North Star metrics or a very personal journey, again, I don't think I've sat down and thought about, hey, what is my North Star? But I think very early on we saw that the healthcare was broken. We I think accidentally set foot in this industry. I mean, for me, it is still an accident. I'm not from healthcare. I think the fact that it was such a crazy big opportunity allowed us, said, hey, we can create a very, very good organization. We can create an organization which can have an impact, an organization which can actually stay on for probably 50, 100 years. I don't know if longer. It's not supposed to be an organization which stays for a couple of 40 years, 3, 4 years, and there's a sold or shut down and stuff. I think that North Star of being able to build this bigger, um, you know, we recently moved to a new office, and it was slightly bigger space. And I could see that most folks said, hey, this is a better place than the last one. Now that was joy for me, that a lot of team, everyone, they had a bigger place, bigger playground to find. So I think whenever we expand, whenever we serve more patients, whenever we get a no bitter feedback, we get a smile from a patient, a thanks from a doctor, you just feel that the playground is widened. Uh, when will that day come when I don't feel like widening this playground? I don't know. But I think every day my focus has been, how does this playground get widened? And to widen it, we have to make sure that the patient experience scales. That is number one priority. The team at Pristyn scales. That is almost like a number two priority. That there is nothing better than the team. And the third part is that just our values stay in place. I think everything else sort of takes care of itself. We will problem solve. We have smart folks. All of us are very honest. So that will solve. But how do we make sure we are patient first? How do we make sure we are a team first? How do we make sure we are collaborating well, and making sure that playground is getting wider? I think that this drive is a North Star for me. It's not evaluation. Maybe it's not the cities. It's not the geographies. It is just that playground is getting wider. When we were 3 people, we said, hey, if we could get to 30 people, that will be great. When we were 30 folks and one city, we said, hey, we could get to 2 cities. That will be amazing. When we got to 2 cities, we said, can we do 10? And when we got to 10, he said, can we do 30? Today, I said, can we do 150? Right? When we got to 100 million valuation, he said, or maybe. Valuation is a crazy number, right? I mean, you start thinking of those paper dollars, but they don't mean much. But when you think of one, say, can you get bigger? So I think it's the drive of expanding that playground and doing it well. I think that pushes you.
Wonderful. I think it's just so heartwarming to hear that the process and the value system is so strong that you're enjoying it and just loving it and so
Yeah,
dedicated to it that the results will eventually follow. I think the results
yeah.
become a byproduct, but it's so great to just see that you are evidently enjoying building for the country so much and delivering that experience so much that you want to keep at it. And that's just speaks volumes of, again, your grit and determination and commitment. So amazing to hear that. My second last question is in terms of just like understanding more about, how you're making decisions now, given that the scope of the playground is increasing, right? The scope of problems have increased, and there's so many, again, moving parts as an individual that you have to handle, right? So be it hiring, be it operational efficiency, be it administrative overload, be it communication, whatnot, right? Like the list never ends, I'm sure. So how do you ensure that not work life balance per se, but how do you ensure that you're prioritizing for the decisions that truly matter? And how do you scale yourself as a founder, right? Because despite the amazing learnings you've had, every day is a new challenge, every day is a new one, right? So how do you ensure that when the problem is getting bigger, larger than you eventually, right? If the problem is going at 2x, you are going at 1.8x, how do you compensate for that by ensuring that your decision making process or your prioritization spectrum is kept in check?
Right. No, I think so. There's a lot of questions, but I'll say the first one is how's I think prioritization and how do you handle scale and stuff. I think, like I said, it all goes back to actually just fundamentally two things: build a great team, share your values and ethos for them, and make them make them driven. I think that's all it is, and make sure you know what you're doing. We are building it for the patients. We know that. So any decision we take, it's patient first. Any decision it has to be team first. When you know these two things, I think it helps you, right? You always have a guiding light. When you have to take a decision, hey, is this helping the patient? Okay, check, no, check. Is it good for the team? Yes, no, yes. Right? And you take some hard decisions. So I think it's all about, I'm sorry, I'm just maybe reiterating, but it's going back to making sure you know what you're doing. We are doing it for the patients.
Yes.
And building a great team. The team is everything. You build a good team, and I think you are going to rock. So I think this some of the best takeaways we'll tell you. When it comes to prioritization, the idea of building a great team is that, in start, everything is a priority. Everything is a priority, right? There is nothing which is not a priority, because it's priority was somebody, if not you, right? Some team member is making sure it's a priority. So I think the way to sort of work on it is, you have a distributed leadership. We have distributed work. I have taken up some roles. My co-founders have taken up some roles. Then we have a senior most leadership. We have distributed some roles to them. That's the first part. Divide your larger domains. And be honest about it. I mean, and support that person who is responsible of that domain to take that decision, and let him fail at it. Because we are hoping that he's going to get more strikes than more failures. So let him take that course. So give that independence, but divide the domains. Once you divided the domains, I think it has helped us to, help us also to put a lot of metrics to it. I think numbers just don't lie. And beyond everything, if you can put the numbers in place, I think you are in a good place. So divide the leadership, have a great team, divide the domains, put down some North Star metrics for everyone, and make sure they know this is for them, and let them chase it. So what happens is that there are some North Star metrics which my co-founder chases, some I chase. All of us blend to a one North Star metric, which is saying patient care should scale and Pristyn should grow. There is actually no other North Star metric, right? Our patient care should improve every day, every day, and every day. Pristyn should grow every day and every day. So all our blended metrics just combine into one. Of course, there's a metrics to check that, but basically that's what it is. The second part is every decision in Pristyn is data driven. I think it is a lie if we say data is not available. It might not be visible, but it is available. Some sort of data is available. If it is not available, go talk to the patients. It will be available, right? So there's always available. If you don't have your own patients or your own customer, talk to somebody else's customers. Yeah. There is always data available. It is almost any decision in Pristyn is data driven. Of course, we again not perfect, must be making those mistakes, and there is a ground to improve. But the ethos is absolutely clear. If a data is saying this, it doesn't matter what designation, what role, what category, what team you belong to, you are right. If you can bring a logical decision, it is the logic in the room which should win, and not the biggest ego or the biggest role or the biggest designation or founder, not founder, nothing changes. So I think build those metrics, look at data, and start scaling your decisions. On a lighter note, when you talk about, what are your priorities, everybody like me will have a 20, 20, 30 priorities. You would have 20 priorities. And we all know pretty much will not be able to go, maybe check mark to top 2 or 3 of them. So I think it's the Pareto principle, right? 20% of the problem solving will have 80% of that impact. So choose those 20% and go after it. The good part is, when you have strong leaders and all of them have their own Paretos and all of them have their own 20% problems, you have a lot of problem solving being done. You have a lot of creative conflict going on. We actually encourage creative conflict. We are encouraging that, why don't you present your opinion? It's okay to say that this is not done well, or this was meant to be happen differently. There is no shame in saying that we fucked up, right? There is just no shame. Like, you have so many leaders, all of them have their priorities, all of them are having creative conflict, all of them are fighting to solve it. You will have a lot of problem solving, and I think as an organization you grow. So I think the end goal is to make sure we keep solving daily and moving, building on. Have a great team, make sure they know your metrics, make sure they know their North Stars, make sure everybody is able to prioritize their 20%, and then everybody should be fighting for the common goal. किसी का काम थोड़ा आगे होगा, थोड़ा पीछे होगा, but हो सबका जाएगा. When you know priorities, it'll be done. So I think the best solution should win, and that's how you do it.
Awesome. I think the perfect balance between, getting it objectively right and qualitatively right, when you talk about trust plus decision making based on metrics, I think all of that just clubs it up in a great way. I think for the last question, this has been truly spectacular. But I think for the last question, it's simple, right? And I knew I told you I wouldn't make you sound old, but if you had to maybe go back to your 20-year-old self, right? And maybe talk to him about the top 2, 3 fundamental guardrails of just going through this journey of starting up, because I'm sure it's not as easy as you're making it sound, right? You made it sound extremely sublime, extremely wonderful, and candidly so. But if you had to just go back to your 20-year-old self and talk to them about, the 3 guardrails of starting up as a founder, what would you tell them, and what would be your final message to everyone listening? I think that would be phenomenal to end with.
I think the first message I would tell everyone is, don't just do it because your friend is doing it or because you read it in a newspaper that this guy bought a fancy home or a car. Don't do that. Do it if you are unable to actually sleep on it. And I have had that experiences a few times in my life, and with my co-founders, and I can tell you, with all the folks I know, everybody said that it was, they wanted to do it so badly that there was just nothing else which went through their mind. And at that point of time, you are not thinking about the rewards. You are just thinking about the excitement of doing it. So be honest to yourself and don't just do it for the heck of doing it because everybody else. Most likely you will fail. The second thing is, have hardly ever seen a founder or ever spoken to one or taken guidance from one. Honestly blessed to have an ecosystem where you can reach out to so many amazing folks, where they didn't have to persevere, to solve this. Even somebody who raised a few $1 million day zero had to persevere to use it. So failures are going to come. Be aware of that. It's going to happen. If you are not failing enough, it just means you're not trying. I know everybody says that, so it's nothing new. But failures are going to come. You have to persevere. Don't expect a silver spoon to come to your mouth second day. It's going to be hard, but that's fine. The third part is, make sure, and I think this is really the only takeaway which I also keep sharing, to my own self, if I ever forget it, is make sure that you are never, never, never bigger than the mission, the company itself. So do it yourself. Make sure you hit the trenches. Make sure you things which don't scale, especially early on. If you are starting a biscuit business, make sure you bake the business. Make sure you get the ingredients. Make sure you burn your hands a couple of times in the oven. Make sure you deliver it yourself. One of the startups which I did was very similar to what Swiggy does. back in 2015, Swiggy was only in Bangalore and we started out of NCR. Needless to say, we failed, and of course, Swiggy has done an amazing work. Uh, I used to go and deliver. I used to do 30 deliveries a day sitting on a bike to understand, what does delivering to a customer mean. And I think I lost 10 kgs just doing that, because I used to go up, Lajpat Nagar, houses, third, fourth, fourth floor, no lifts, day in, day out, distributed pamphlets on the metro station, and then went to just deliver food. 30 deliveries a day, the last week at 2 a.m. in the night sometimes, right? But that taught me crazy. And I think that's what I've seen at Urban Clap. That's what the best folks did. They did it themselves. That's what we see at Pristyn. The most successful leaders are the ones who have done it themselves. So do it yourself first before you share the knowledge. Don't just go out and blab. Do it yourself. Gyan vyan mein kuch nahi rakha. Execute, 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 and have progress. You have to progress, even if it is by little amount daily. So I think that's what I tell everyone. I don't know, that sounds valuable, but that's for me. I think I can't forget that.
No, that's extremely valuable. And thanks so much for that, Harsh. And not only that, just the entire conversation, which in my head just was flowing like a breeze of pure motivational and actionable insights to starting up. And it's so great to just observe your journey in and out. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, because this was absolutely fabulous.
Thanks for the time, Raj. Had a really good time, and thank you for the opportunity. Enjoyed sharing and almost reliving my journey every day. It gives me goosebumps thinking about all this all the time. So I think there you go. The passion stays.
Thank you so much, Harsh. This has been wonderful.